this part is gonna be all about buildings, and I'm gonna link you guys to these buildings on Sketchfab. They are free to use for personal, and I believe some of them require you to link the creator. So I'm gonna link all of these in the video description down below. And well, this whole process is basically me taking those buildings and retexturing it from scratch, because their style is very different in terms of texturing, and we only have like 5 or 6 buildings here. So I would like for them, even if we have the same building scattered several times, I want it to look a little bit different each time with each instance. So I'm definitely retexturing most of the stuff that I'm bringing in externally. And once again, I want to remind you that the color maps should be set to sRGB primaries, normal maps, and well, basically all of your data maps like displacement normals, roughness should be set to raw data for the ACES workflow. And yeah, as you can see, I'm just using the very multi-text texture, so by instance AD, by particle AD, all of that. And here you can see I'm using by element, but I removed it at the end because we have some roof that is not a single element, so I didn't want that roof to be completely random, each element. So yeah, now I'm basically doing the roof. And at the beginning I thought I could get away with just doing the roofs, but at the end I did a single material, kind of like Kitbash 3D does their stuff. So you have one single multi-mate material that kind of includes all of the materials, and you just selecting the elements, put in the different AD if you want to change the material. And it'll help us later on because we're having the single material AD for the same elements basically across the buildings. So if, let's say, I have material 81 on the roof, I'm gonna know that I can scatter, let's say, chimneys onto those rooftops, as well as, let's say, if I want to, if I'm gonna have a lot of chimneys, I would have to do a lot of card placement in Nuke, but I can negate that by scattering planes on top of the chimneys in Max, and then bringing the Alembic to Nuke and just texturing the actual smoke from those inside of Nuke. So yeah, basically a single multi-material is very helpful for our workflow, for our purposes. In this tutorial, I'm mostly gonna be quiet and only talk when I do something that's not really easily understandable. Like, let's say over here, I'm doing a UW randomizer and I'm putting the steps to 2 and also turning off the rotation, because this is a pattern-like texture. So we don't want it to be rotated in weird angles, and we don't want the offsetting to be very visible in the render. So now you can see I'm creating a new material view. I'm just gonna grab the roof material from it and create a new multi-sub object material with 6 material IDs. 1 for the roof, I believe, 2 for the wood, 2 for the stones, and 1 for doors and 1 for windows. So that, and each one of these is gonna have like 3 or 4 different textures in the very multi-sub texture map, so that each instance is gonna have slightly different material. So you can see I'm gonna use the same material UVW randomizer for all of the textures of the same material. And it's a very long manual process of retexturing stuff, and it can get quite repetitive and boring at times, but there's nothing you can do about it. It should be done. Otherwise, well, you can always leave it with the basic materials that you're gonna have from Sketchfab. But for me, it just didn't work, and I wanted something better with more control over the look, with more variation, so that even though we have 5 or 6 buildings, we're gonna have variation per building, so that they look slightly different, even though the geometry is basically the same. And I'm speeding this process up, sometimes up to 600-700%, but for the important part, like which textures I downloaded, which textures I used, or which settings I used at the end, I'm gonna slow the video down to 200% so that you can catch all the settings, all the materials that I did for this. And it took me around, well, I don't even know, probably around 6 hours, 5 hours to retexture all of this. Well, probably way smaller than that, but it just felt like that for sure. By the way, these doors and windows textures I just salvaged from the textures of the building from the Sketchfab. So I just took their diffuse cropped it into 1024 by 1024 diffuse texture, and I'm just gonna use this texture to drive the roughness, bump, and the reflection. Now, as you can see from here on out, I'm gonna reapply the material IDs for each element of the building for each building, so that they all share the same material with the same material ID structure to better organize the scene and to help us later on scatter some things on top of it. So now I'm just gonna use TyFlow to see if our shader is working correctly, as it should, that each scatter particle, each scattered shape, gonna have the slightly different texturing. It's important to use the inheritance of the materials in the TyFlow's shape operator. As you can see, it's working quite well. Each building is slightly different, so even though the shape looks the same, the building itself have different material. And now I'm gonna do chimneys to scatter on top of the roofs. And for the chimneys, I'm only gonna have a multi-sub object material with two elements. One is for the bricks and one is for metal. So I'm basically repeating the same process. I'm taking the previously created material, just deleting the textures and reassigning the different textures from the Megascan library. Now you can see here that at first I thought about doing a separate TyFlow to scatter on top of the buildings, but it would require you to have the actual geometry in the viewport, which would result in the unbearable amount of polygons in some cases. So I'm scrapping this idea and just using the same TyFlow with the spawn operator, and I'm checking the spawn only on shape polygons which have material ID 1. Now I see that chimneys sometimes spawn very close to the edge of the geometry, resulting in visible chimneys underneath the roofs. So I decided that I want to inset some faces and make them different material ID so that we have smaller polygon area that those chimneys can be spawned at. And now just for the demonstration, I'm spawning some planes on those chimneys that later can be used in Nuke to texture in some smoke. And now I'm just gonna tweak some materials further because there's quite huge the hue shift and also gamma and saturation shift, so I'd like to fix that. Now back to our scene. I'm just gonna merge those buildings into this scene, except for the sun and anything that I don't need. No camera, no lights, no shapes, nothing. And we don't need the plane, we also don't need that TyFlow. And I'm just gonna replace the buildings. I'm just copying and pasting from the TyFlow that we created previously. And as you can see here, they updated automatically. Now I just checked the bounding boxes, as I just call them BB for bounding box, but they're clearly not. Anyway, I just checked if they contain the base building inside their mesh. So that we have a proper exclusion area from the forest pack. Now you can see I forgot to check inheritance of the materials. And this is it for this part. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.